Starting off with the office market snapshot, Gillian will take us through an overview of the vacancy data, and then Ken will talk about the Q3 status, the market trends, and then the tenant perspective.
Thanks, Ed. Looking at the office vacancy stats, there have been rises in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth and Canberra. Darwin and Hobart have remained static, and Brisbane and Adelaide recorded decreases. Despite the increase in vacancy, Perth and Melbourne recorded the highest positive net absorption figures in the 12 months to July, meaning the increases here are due to new stock coming onto the market. Brisbane saw the third highest demand, which is reflected in the vacancy decrease, and the Brisbane fringe office market also recorded a decrease in vacancy. If we look at Sydney, vacancy has now creeped to just over 10%. But if we look further to the suburban markets, Parramatta, North Sydney and Chatswood have all recorded vacancy rates above 18%. North Sydney and Chatswood is due to negative demand, and Parramatta is due to new supply. If we head over the ditch to New Zealand, Wellington remains low, Auckland saw a decrease, and Christchurch is static. I'll pass over to Ken now for his views on the office.
Well, thanks, Gillian. What you can see here, so this is actually a common theme, what we're going to run through the presentation on all markets. From what you can see, the two barometers illustrate the difference between lease norms and market conditions. As you can see, whilst office market conditions are to be considered to be tenant friendly, the lease norms are still very much in favour of the landlord. And over the next couple of slides, we will talk through the barometer and how they apply to the market and to you as a tenant. Firstly, I'll just start off with the status of the office market. Starting off with the flight to quality. So it is actually still prevalent in the marketplace. Businesses are still continuing to switch to better office accommodation as they seek to provide better accommodation to attract their employees back to the office. Based on some research that was provided by Investor, which is one of the landlords, it was estimated that 95% of the transactions that have occurred over last quarter were in that prime grade stock, being the A and premium grade. Face rental. In response to the flight to quality and the increase in demand for the prime grade stock, it did result in a slight increase in gross face rents in the CBD markets, in particularly Sydney and Brisbane, with the estimated growth sitting around 5%. Gross rents in the secondary stock, being the B grade, remain flat. Leasing. Look, in comparison to the last quarter, the demand for office space has softened due to the overall economy, with the slow return to work and the rising costs and interest rates, and in particular with the CPI also. Occupancy in the office or return to work, look, it is still sitting around 58%. Obviously, this data is actually provided by the PCA, which is a landlord representative body, and we suspect this number to actually paint a rosier picture than what it is. I suspect these figures are much lower. In comparison to last quarter, the figures were sitting around 56.5% as an average. Demand. With the increase in vacancy rates, there has been a significant increase in vacancy rates in the non-CBD markets, in particular North Sydney, Parramatta in Sydney, and St Kilda Road in Melbourne, with a vacancy rate sitting close to 20%. Like, some of these factors of the higher rates include new supply coming online, businesses deciding not to renew the lease because people are still working from home, and or businesses deciding to relocate to the CBD to take a step up in the flight to quality and taking advantage of the incentives that are on offer. Thanks, Ed. What are the market trends? What are we seeing? Firstly, ESG. Look, whilst this has been around for some time, there has been a significant shift and increased focus in environmentally sustainable buildings as landlords are seeking to upgrade their buildings to compete for the shallow pool of tenants that are currently in the marketplace. But in turn, there are a number of tenants seeking to find ways to reduce their carbon footprint and to achieve their net zero targets, which have been set by head office. Coupled with this, the ESG focus, there's also been a significant focus on health and well-being, and what buildings can offer. An example of a number of initiatives that will be incorporated into new office developments are breathable spaces, where you can actually open the window within the office building, pools, gymnasiums, running tracks, and garden areas, in particular around the rooftop and terrace areas. Look, over the past years, these two areas have been largely driven by landlords. However, the rules of the games are now changing, and the tenants are now dictating the terms of these two, ESD and health and wellbeing, and landlords are actually now being penalised if they cannot actually meet the targets that are required by the tenants. Hybrid working, it's still relevant in the marketplace, and we suspect this actually trend is here to stay for the long term. As mentioned in the earlier slide, there is a demand for higher grade or prime grade stock, in which employers are still trying to find ways to get the employees back to the office. Lease norms. From our discussions with the landlords, there is still some resistance from landlords to change the lease norms and the rules of the games. And these lease terms are still very much drafted in favour of the landlord. However, we are placing greater emphasis on these terms in order to shift the barometer to make the terms more tenant friendly. The tenant perspective. What are we saying, and what are our recommendations to our clients? Engage early, don't wait. Our recommendation to our clients is to review the longer term office accommodation strategy well ahead to lease expiry. We often tell our clients that time is leverage. And part of the process of engaging early is to understand the market conditions as well as the possible alternatives available to the business. This could include comparing the terms of your option provisions against relocating to a new building or restructuring the lease in your current space. Flexibility. Look, as a result of the pandemic, there has been a greater need and focus for lease flexibility. Whilst this isn't a new concept, our advice to all of our clients is to ensure that they have the appropriate provisions in their lease to ensure they are not stuck during the term of the lease. Look, some of the flexibility clauses could include contraction rights, surrender rights, expansion rights, and the ability to sublease or sign your lease. Critical event and leveraging. It's important to ensure that you know how and when to leverage these key critical events. Look, an example of this, or a simple example of this is being aware of the last date to provide notice to exercise your option. Our advice to all of our clients is actually to do their research well prior to this last date to ensure you actually have the appropriate information so that you can actually make an informed decision on whether the best option is to exercise the option term or restructure the lease. We consider the option term to be essentially an insurance policy. Our workplace trends. It's important for you as a tenant and businesses to know what the current trends are and which trend is best suited towards your business. Like, is your business suited towards a hybrid, traditional, or hub and spoke model? And also within your current buildings, does it offer third space? Is there a third space provider, and can you actually build that into your workplace? Whilst taking these factors into consideration, it's also equally important to ensure that your lease contains the appropriate provisions to support your workplace. For instance, going back to my second point about having greater lease flexibility, which provides you with either a right to scale up or scale down without actually being penalised through the duration of your lease.
Thanks, Ken.